Good morning, YouTube. Today, I want to talk about how you can buy a Ferrari.
Can't stop, won't stop. I can't stop, won't stop. I can't stop, won't stop. Can't stop.
So are you recording all of the nefarious activities?
If you're new to the channel, my name is Dan. This is my Ferrari 458, and we do a lot of videos about DIY work on Ferraris and reviews and other things about that, basically trying to explain what it's like to actually experience owning a supercar. So I've been asked by a lot of people, how is it that you can actually buy a Ferrari? And it's kind of a strange question, and I know it's a lot of financial implications and things like that, and so that's usually what people are discussing. So I want to talk about some of those things, but I actually want to talk about what the actual process of buying a Ferrari is kind of like. This goes for any supercar. It doesn't have to be a Ferrari. Obviously, I'm pretty partial to Ferraris, so that's what we'll just say Ferrari, but feel free to exchange it with the word supercar. So before we get going, I actually want to explain that I do have some consultation services as well as some other things that we can do to help you buy a supercar. That's actually part of the motivation behind this. Is you'll see there's lots of stuff that you probably don't need any help with, but maybe there's some things that you would like help with, and if you do, feel free to reach out to me. We can kind of come up with a plan and see what makes sense given your budget and what you're trying to accomplish. So if you're interested in any of those services, go visit normalguysupercar.com, check out my shopping section, then go check out the consultation services, and you'll see those are some of the things I offer. Also, if you happen to have a supercar for sale, I actually allow you to list that car for sale for free on my website. Yes, totally free. This is a no bullshit thing, just free. Go list your car for sale on my website, normalguysupercar.com. So if you're thinking about buying a Ferrari or any sort of supercar, the first thing that you should probably do is figure out what are your goals for that car. People have different reasons they want to own a Ferrari. It ultimately matters a lot in what car you should get based on the goals that you have. Are you planning on driving the car a lot, or are you planning on having it showed in concours? Or are you planning on just kind of having a car that you can once in a while take a date out on a good night? All those different things matters. Think really critically about what is it that you want out of this car. What are the goals of this car? Maybe it's just simply, I want to achieve a childhood dream. And if that's the case, maybe any old Ferrari will do. If you are trying to get a concours level car, you're going to probably have to spend a lot more money. So obviously, the more the car is going to be perfect and the more original it is, the more expensive that they're going to be. So you can kind of scale the expectations based on budget and what your goals are, and make sure that those two things align. If those aren't aligned, ultimately you're going to have a bad time and you're not going to enjoy your experience with this car. But finally, keep in mind, it's still just a car. This is a thing, and it's an optional expense. That really needs to be factored into your mentality when you're buying one of these cars. Now that you have your goals set for the car, it's time to start researching the car. You probably have a specific car in mind. As I personally would start looking up for YouTube videos, message boards, chats, whatever, anything I could dig up about that particular car. Learn the things that can go wrong with the car, learn whether or not it needs a lot of maintenance, even go to car shows and talk to people that actually own them. So a great way to do that is go to Cars and Coffee and go find someone who's got the car that you want and talk to them. You'll find that most owners, if you ask them questions about the car, are really willing to talk about it. They love talking about their car. Most likely, most of them. I'm not saying you're not going to run across occasionally some jerks that won't talk about it. Seriously, go approach some owners and say, hey, I'm thinking about buying one of these cars. Would you mind, answering some questions about the reliability? Maybe you want to ask about what's their actual experience like. What's it actually like owning the car? That is a great way to learn more about the car. And anytime you go on the message boards or any of the online stuff and read about these things, take it with a grain of salt. There's a lot of crap out there. A lot of these people talk about the cars, don't actually own them. Everyone's experience varies. Some of the owners have good experience, some of them don't. I think a lot of times people have the wrong goals. They end up buying the wrong car, and then they have a bad experience, and then they crap on the car. That's not necessarily a function of the car being bad. It's a function of the owners having the wrong goals, and they're buying the wrong car. Take everything you read online with a bit of skepticism. Don't take it as fact. A lot of times there's misinformation, so try and find reliable sources that you end up trusting. So if you get to a situation where you're torn between multiple cars, the best advice I can give you is go sit in them and go, if you can, drive them. So a lot of places won't let you test drive these cars because once you get to these price points, they're just not trusting anyone to go drive them. But if you can, go take them for a test drive, go sit in them, go experience what it's actually like to be in that car, because a lot of times you'll find the car you thought you really wanted, you might not. That actually was the case for me for a long time. I really thought I wanted the McLaren MP412C, and then I drove it. And the same day I drove that car, I also drove the 458, and that's when I actually fell in love with Ferrari. I realized I did not like the way the McLaren drove. That's not to say that the McLaren's not a great car. It's just not the car that I wanted. It didn't behave the way that I thought it should. It didn't have the driving experience that I wanted out of that car. The 458, on the other hand, had a great experience and it actually exceeded my expectations, and that's why I fell in love with the 458, and that's ultimately why I ended up buying the car that I have today. Another reason you need to go sit in the car is maybe you don't fit in it. So if you're a tall guy or a big guy, some of these sports cars are really small in the interior and the seats aren't very wide at all. So you might not even fit in the car, especially with the older ones. So the older the car, the more likely it is to have a small interior. Generally, the modern cars tend to have a little bit more space, and they've kind of started to make the cars be able to fit normal human beings, frankly. If you're like 6'5", it's going to be a struggle. Some of these cars, you will not be able to fit in them at all. Looking at the modern stuff, you probably can fit. Again, you got to go check out the cars in person, try and go sit in them, and if you can get access to one, go for a test drive, or at least go for a test ride at a minimum. Okay, so you've got the car of your dreams figured out. Now you need to determine your budget. So this is where it comes down to you taking a hard look at your personal finances and what you're willing to spend on this car. A lot of times people say, don't buy a supercar unless you can afford to pay cash, and I actually think that's totally bullshit. So the vast majority of these people aren't paying cash for cars. However, it's probably good to have enough cash on hand to be able to afford these cars because they can be quite expensive, and the reality is some of them require a ton of maintenance. So because of taking the time to really research the car, you hopefully understand what sort of maintenance you're getting into, what's going to be required of the car. Some of these older Ferraris require the engine to come out every 5 years. You need to bake that into your equation. So the good news is that some of these cars have been around long enough that you kind of can figure out the maintenance and what's going to be happening with them pretty easily if you look around. Make sure you really understand what you're getting into. And again, this goes back to talking to people, asking questions, find out what it's really like to own these cars and what sort of costs are really involved. Ultimately, you need to make sure that it's not going to be just buying the car that you can pay for. Buying the car is step one. You got to register it. You got to insure it. Insurance varies wildly based on the state that you live in. So some of the states are cheap, some are really expensive. I know that even the registration fees can be extremely expensive. For example, if you live in Michigan, they base the registration on the original sales price of the car, which means these cars are really expensive to register every year versus in Texas, it doesn't matter what car you have, it's $73. $73 doesn't matter. So this car is $73, that car is $73, my wife's car is $73. Doesn't matter. Also factor in things like tires. The tires on these cars can be very expensive. I would try and come up with a plan and say, these are the things that I expect this car to need every year, every few years, and then kind of figure out, can you afford all of that? It's very common that when you first buy the car, there's a lot of deferred maintenance. As people have these cars longer and longer, they're not keeping up with what needs to be done with the car. So when you first get it, there could be an onslaught of maintenance. That should not be an indicator of how it's going to be in a few years once you've kind of taken care of all that and gotten the car sorted. So having done a lot of these consultations with people and talked to many people buying these cars, I've come to a conclusion about something, which is these cars are optional. And because of that, don't compromise. Do not get the car you kind of want. Make sure to wait around and get the car you really want. Get the color you want. Get the options you want. Try and find the right car. This means it might take more time than you think. It could take quite a while to find the right car. Again, this is an optional expense, so get the car you really want. And the reason I say that is when you compromise, you may end up hating the car or not liking it as much as you could if you get the car you really wanted. At the same time that you're trying to get the car you really want, you got to factor in that there's an emotional component when buying a car like this. Be aware of that. Don't let your emotions make you make a bad decision. Yes, you want the car of your dreams, but don't buy the car of your dreams if that means you can't send your kids to college or lose your house or something like that. Obviously, buy the car within reason that you can afford and get the best that you can, and don't compromise within reason. So another common question I've gotten is, does it matter if you're buying from a dealership or a private owner? And I'm gonna tell you, yes, it does matter. There is a bit of difference about it, but you gotta scale your expectations based on who you're gonna be dealing with. So generally speaking, dealers are going to be more expensive. They have a business to run. They need to make a profit. So therefore, they have certain margins they need to meet. That means they may not be as willing to negotiate as a private owner. That's not always true, though. I also want to point out that just because it's a dealership doesn't mean that it's someone you can trust. A lot of times, the dealerships are just as shady as anyone else. I hate to say this, but some dealerships are amazing, very honest, forthright, and all that stuff. I'm going to say most of them aren't. In fact, if you look at the description, most of these cars are in immaculate condition. They're absolutely amazing, beautiful, drives perfectly. And then you go look at it in person, oh boy, they got some problems. that thing is not immaculate in any way. They want you to think it's immaculate, but man, that is not immaculate. Either we have difference of opinion on what immaculate means, or that car is not immaculate. So only big problem with private buyers is that it's a mixed bag. You've got people who are sometimes emotionally attached to their car, so maybe they're unwilling to negotiate at all. Perhaps they've even set the value way higher than is actually reality. The market kind of can tell you what these cars are worth, generally speaking, and sometimes you've got these outliers because someone emotionally is attached to this car and they think, well, this car is mine and it's perfect and therefore it's worth more. In reality, it's not. So that's the only problem with private buyers, is just it's so varied, you just don't know. But on the plus side, every once in a while you find a private seller who finds that you're the right person for the car and is willing to give you a good deal because they like you. So you can use this to your advantage. Use all of these tricks and all of this information that you can to make sure that you get the best deal possible. Which leads us to the actual negotiation. So yes, this part of the buying process can be quite a pain. You need to scale how aggressive you're willing to negotiate based on how much you really want that car and how rare some of the options are that you want. If you found the car of your dreams and frankly you've been looking for 9 months and this is it, this is the one, well, you might not want to negotiate that hard if you really want that car, because you might not get an opportunity for a car exactly like that again. On the other side, if you're kind of flexible and maybe you don't really care if it's red or blue, then yeah, go for it. Give a lowball offer, negotiate hard, find any weakness that you can to exploit. Expect that some of these negotiations can drag on for days. These are tricky negotiations. It doesn't always happen fast. Sometimes it does. I've had some of these cars get negotiated in under an hour, and other times it's lasted many days. Understand that each situation needs to be felt out and negotiated according to each person involved. If you're not sure you want to deal with any of this, I actually offer a negotiation service. So yes, you can hire me and my team to help negotiate for you. That is one of the consultation services that I have, so go check that out. We probably end up getting a pretty good deal for you. All right, so you've settled, you've got the negotiation finalized, and you're ready to sign the line, and now it comes time to actually pay for the car. Do you pay in cash or do you finance it? Well, I'm going to tell you again, just as I said earlier, you don't have to have cash and you don't need to pay cash for these cars. In fact, most of the people are financing these cars, so there's no shame in that. I actually think it's a smarter thing financially to do if you can get a low interest rate. Use your cash in other ways. Don't tie up your cash on a devaluing asset. Most of these cars are still devaluing unless you're buying something rare. So just like you would any other normal car situation, there's no reason to not buy these with financing if you can get good financing. So where do you look for financing in these cars? Well, I have been using my local credit unions quite a bit. I found that they usually give the best rates. This is going to be totally varied on your personal situation, and so I can't give you a whole lot of details that are going to be super helpful. Reach out to your local credit unions, reach out to your local banks, hell, reach out to someone you know, maybe, I don't know. There's also some online services like PenFed and some other things like that. I personally haven't used any of those, so I can't speak to what they're like, but apparently a lot of people use them. It comes down to, if you're financing the car, get the lowest interest rate you can and make sure that you can afford the payments, and make sure that this isn't going to be something that's going to kill your budget. So before you take delivery of the car, one thing that comes up is the PPI. A lot of people say that you should get a pre-purchase inspection. I'm actually of a different boat on this. I actually think a lot of the PPIs are crap and a waste of money. So here's the thing. It varies dramatically. I've seen a lot of PPIs now. I've seen how different companies do it. Everyone's different and everyone has a different set of standards. If you get a good company that's really trustworthy and does a great PPI, it is worth its weight in gold. There are some out there that do an amazing job, and there's some that just do absolute crap. So what I would suggest is call around to a few places. You got to make sure that the seller is even willing to let you have a PPI, which means they're going to have to inspect the car and probably take it somewhere, put it up in the air, and even remove like the under panels and things like that. Ask the PPI supplying company for an example of what they're doing. So get a sheet, get their PPI sheet before you pay them, before you sign up, because see what they're actually going to inspect, make sure that they're actually going to do a good job. And if you're unsure of this, this is one of those areas where you could hire me as a consultant to figure out whether or not they're going to do a good PPI or not, because man, they are all over the board. Again, PPIs are hit and miss. If they're great, they help you out. But man, otherwise they are just taking your money and running to the bank. Okay, so you bought your supercar of your dreams. It's time to get it home. Most likely you aren't going to buy a supercar in your hometown. It's just very uncommon unless you happen to get lucky. Probably going to have to ship the car or drive it. And that comes down to a personal choice for you. Do you want to ship this car? Do you want to drive it? That's up to you. I personally do not trust these shipping companies. I can tell you that the number of people who have shipped these cars and had them get damaged is really really, really high. If you're willing to ship the car, make sure you confirm that they are an insured shipper, find out their policies, and make sure that they've done super low supercars before, because these cars aren't easy to ship. They tend to get scratched really easy, and people screw up all the time. On the converse of that, you could turn it into an awesome adventure. What better way to experience your newfound joy than to go drive it 1,000 miles? I think that's an awesome way to buy a new car and then immediately celebrate it. I've gotten pretty lucky. Both of my cars were fairly local. One was in San Antonio, one was in Dallas, so both of them were within 3-hour drives. So obviously I drove those home. There's no reason to ship from that close. Hopefully you found this video helpful. So if you did, please consider giving me a thumbs up and sharing this video. I do appreciate when you guys do that. It helps out my channel tremendously. Thank you very much. If you're a big fan of this channel, please consider signing up for a membership. Again, those things do help me out. One of my goals for this channel is indeed to help you guys have a better experience with your supercars, whether it's buying or selling or the actual experience of owning them. So that is my goal, and I try my best to answer as many questions as you guys have. So feel free to comment below with any questions you might have. But even better yet, if you're serious about buying one of these cars and you're just not sure, and maybe this video was helpful but you want more, reach out to me and let's talk about some of my consultation services. Let's get you set up for some phone time. Again, you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for watching. We've got a lot of car stuff coming away. You guys are going to want to stay tuned. It's going to be sweet.